Steam quickly, if it would let me. Come on, videos, come on, silly thing. Here we go. Okay, let me share, copy that, share to newsfeed, post, and share again to Twitter. Okay, there we go. What's up, YouTube? It's Daniel the Ultimate Blade here, back again once again with DestinyCast episode 2 part 2. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Oh, that's messed up. It's at episode 3. It's episode 2 part 2 on The Fallen. Today I have my lovely co-host with me as always, who would like to sound off.
What's good, YouTube land? Nelson Form here, back again once again today, people. Today we're finally back.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a break. Just I think life gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it? It's just like things happen.
And the current season of stuff in Destiny have been kind of preoccupying our time.
Yeah, that's definitely one way of putting it. I've been cranking the shit out of this game, so yeah. Been cranking the shit out of all this stuff, so yeah, I'm not shocked that we took a break for a little while, but we're back and fresh and ready to talk about The Fallen a bit more and their moments in sort of Destiny 2. So in Destiny 2, back with sort of like Destiny 1 and everything, we don't actually see a lot of The Fallen in Destiny 2 again. It's very sort of moments that are just sort of spread around the story and everything. So with the Red War and everything, the Fallen had a very minimalistic part of that where the Fallen have just sort of scattered because they have seen the Red War come, they saw the Cabal come in, and with the damage that we had done to them and everything, we basically annihilated probably about 80% of their houses, probably more actually.
Yeah, we took down devils, wolves, rain,
yeah, kings.
kings
were sort of destroyed by wolves.
Yeah.
So in proxy, since we destroyed, wolves are kind of destroyed kings as well. So they've sort of just split off into like their own like sort of like one Fallen faction of where they've basically mercenaries, which I think is a good way to sort of describe it. So yeah, that's sort of where the Fallen went off during the Red War of Destiny 2 and everything. We had a couple of moments from them on the rig on Titan where they tried to blow up the whole of the rig on Titan with explosives that we then turned against them. I think that was originally to destroy some Hive as well, actually. Yeah,
yes, because the hive had literally infested the entirety of the arcology.
Yeah, it's just like, I think the Fallen were just basically trying to take some of it back, but went a bit ham with the explosives.
I mean, bomb logic.
Yeah, basically. And while we're on Titan, that brings us to our good friend Eramis.
Yes.
So his whole lore point starts with the story on Titan. It's a story where we're basically racing the Fallen to like a reactor in the Titan arcology to basically gain some more power and restore more power to the rig. Now this story has two endings. We're following a Fallen captain and everything through his forces, decimating his forces while we're at it, and also destroying a butt ton of Hive. And this story has two endings. We've got the non-canon ending where we find the leader of the Hive and the Fallen and basically kill them both, and we claim the power for ourselves. And then we've got the canon ending. And the canon ending is where we kill the knight, but we spared the Fallen captain, and the captain gestures us to come closer and basically gives us the reactor which he was going to use to generate more ether. So that's our first sort of like interaction with Eramis.
Isn't that Mithrax?
Mithrax. I'm talking about the wrong person. I'm talking about Mithrax.
I'm talking about Mithrax.
Fallen and their names. They confuse me. They're all so similar. It's just like, they're so confusing. But that is Mithrax.
Yes. So, yeah, we were talking about Mithrax there. Mithrax is an interesting story, for me particularly, because when you consider their history and lore when it pertains to the Traveller, you would think at some point that there would be a Fallen somewhere that would be like, we shouldn't be fighting the humans for the Traveller, we should be fighting with the humans and with the Traveller in order to gain its favour. And Mithrax happens to be that one Fallen who believes in that kind of ideology.
See, this is where the Fallen split off quite a bit. Since at the moment we have basically 3 sections of, well, technically 4 actually, if you count the Scorn, but we'll talk about Scorn in a minute. But we have 4 factions. We have Mithrax and his newly formed House of Light, which is sort of trying to ally himself with the Guardians and everything, and that starts with the Outbreak Perfected quest, where he shows us where the Outbreak Perfected is, and how to use it and how to wield it. So that's his first sort of like venture into allying with the humans and the Guardians by showing them access to a weapon of Siva capabilities, which we covered a bit of Siva on the last episode. And then we had Eramis and the House of... What they called it? The House of Darkness, basically, isn't it?
House of Darkness, but she was trying to reform the House of Devils.
Yeah.
And there's actually a bit more context that goes into her struggle, the struggle for the Fallen altogether. I think we did mention it in the last part about their loss of identity when moving to the Sol system, and how through several intelligence reports, I can't remember which law book it is, but we learned through several intelligence reports that were taken by, I think, primarily the Hidden, but then they were kind of like most people tended to find out this stuff in Guardian Society, that the Fallen were more fractured than usual. You had newer Fallen born fairly recently who were not beholden to traditional Fallen behaviors and archetypes. And some of the older generation that somehow still survived, like Verex, Mithrax, and Eramis, who held higher positions, were trying to collate all the Fallen again under one unified house. And Verex and Eramis are kind of in that struggle between the two of them, trying to... Eramis reform the House of Devil, which she was the Baroness to. And Verex was part of... Wasn't he a House of Wolves? And then what?
He was House of Wolves originally, and then betrayed them to basically align with the Queen of the Awoken.
Yeah. So they're Fallen traditionalists who believe in going back to the old ways and the old form of living as Fallen. And then you have Mithrax off to the side like, those ways are good, and I'm an old hat at this, but we need to move forward and evolve socially and in our dynamic when referring to the other creatures we happen to be sharing a system with.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to human society and Guardian society. It's just like, which is very interesting in general. That brings us to Verex. Verex the Loyal.
And loyal he is.
Indeedy. You know, it's just like, so... Verex is a very complicated creature, isn't he? It's just like, we're not entirely sure what side he's actually on.
He's on his own side, Dan.
Yeah, he's basically on his own side to basically gather the Fallen in the ways of the old and everything, as already mentioned. It's just like, but it'll be interesting to see where he comes into the story. And that brings us to another branch of the Fallen, because then actually there's 5 branches of the Fallen, actually, because I'm wrong. So, the fourth branch of the Fallen, before we start talking about the Scorn, is Spider's Fallen. Now, Spider is very interesting. He's basically a fallen gangster, which is probably the best way of actually describing him. So he has sort of like taken over the Tangled Shore, which was originally owned by the Awoken before the Queen's demise. Well, so-called demise. And basically he's like a gangster of that and everything, and is kind of on no one's side but his own. So as Guardians, we sort of owe him a favour since he helped us in our quest against Prince Aldrin and the Scorn. So that's why I think he might play an important role, since he might want to take a position of authority amongst the Fallen and might request our help to do it.
So you think he's going to try and become a Kel?
Yeah.
But in a way, isn't he a Kel anyway?
Yeah, I reckon he's a Kel anyway, but he's more sort of like of the fallen dark underbelly of the Tangled Shore. Like, for instance, in the strike where we're taking back the prison of elders and everything, he was he tasked the Drifter with doing that. He paid the Drifter to basically clear it out, and then he was going to sell it back to the Awoken.
Funny.
So he is basically a fallen gangster. If anything, he sort of reminds me of the Godfather. I reckon we will probably find like a Vex head buried in like the House of Light's bed or something. It's just like, I can see it happening. I can see it happening, and he also collects dead ghosts as well.
Yeah, that's a bit scary. His fascination with the Guardians goes as far as collecting their ghost shells.
He's even got living ones as well, because when you're doing the Drifter Allegiance quests and everything, you basically have to bribe Spider to basically get what you want from his black market. And there's for like 900 like Ascendant shards or something silly like that. Is the chance to actually buy a living ghost shell off of him. So a living ghost that he's held captive.
Oh wow.
Which is quite interesting. But I think he's also after our ghost as well. He's mentioned that he wants our ghost.
I mean, our ghost is the best.
Okay. Well, sometimes.
Our ghost is called Ghost.
Yeah. He has no name. He's just Ghost.
He's just Ghost. Or everyone else has freaking named.
Yeah, ours
Ghost.
is just Ghost. Or Little Light. Which they do call it sometimes.
He literally could have been called Pulled Pork.
Yeah.
Prince Aldrin. Prince Aldrin must have so much fun with that guy.
Oh yeah, easily. It's just like... But talking about Prince Aldrin, that moves us on to the Scorn, who are a whole different...
Oh dear, Dan is gone.
Sorry, Lan?
I'm getting really good with these takeaways, aren't I?
Yeah, definitely. I'm getting really good at those. So, the Scorn, they're a whole different kettle of fish. Basically what they are, they're zombie fallen.
Explain how that works then.
So basically how it works is that we have a creature called the Fanatic, and how it sort of worked originally and how he sort of gained the power to resurrect the fallen through what he calls dark ether that he has corrupted. He gained that power through Prince Aldrin and basically became immortal, which is why you still find his full Scorn on the Tangled Shore and the Dreaming City, because the Fanatic is not dead. So, yeah, so the Scorn are basically fallen that have been killed by us or by anything, resurrected through the power of dark ether.
But what is dark ether, Dan?
That we do not know yet. That information is not known to us yet. But what the theory crafters are sort of saying is it's ether that has sort of been corrupted. Whether that be through the powers of darkness as well, since we know that Prince Aldrin gave him this power and he was very connected to the powers of darkness anyway from being awoken. since they are the closest to the darkness. Which is a very interesting thought. But the Scorn are still around. They're still mulling around on the Tangled Shore with basically the Fanatic forever reviving himself and the Scorn in general. So we're not quite sure where they're going to lead, if they're going to lead anywhere. They might just stay on the Tangled Shore and basically be forgotten. But that would be a shame at the same time, since they are interesting in sort of how they work and everything. They are an interesting enemy to fight, along with the Barons as well of the Scorn, which are basically like the Fanatic's right-hand men and women.
So we have Fickrel, the Fanatic.
Yes.
Elchris, the Machinist.
Who's the right-hand man.
Then we have Hirax, the Mindbender. I thought his design was kind of cool. I liked it.
Now the Mindbender is a whole different topic completely. So what the Mindbender basically did is he was obsessed with the Hive and merging ether with the Hive, which had very explosive results because the Hive couldn't tolerate the ether, and their worms would basically blow up and explode. But he thought he could weed out that intolerance into ether and basically create a segment of Hive that could use ether to their advantage.
That's cool. But then didn't he also have an Ascendant Realm? Or like access to an Ascendant Realm?
Yeah, he had access to an Ascendant Realm where we go and kill him. Which isn't the only person that has access to an Ascendant Realm that isn't a Hive.
Well, you know, Morosov has one.
Yeah. Which is like a whole different story and a whole bit of lore that I really need to get into, because that's a bit of lore that I'm not really that versed in at the moment.
Give it time, soldier. Give it time. Then we have the Trickster.
Trickster's so annoying. That fight is so annoying. And
what do you know about him, though, Dan? What do you know?
No, I don't know much about him, to be fair. They don't really tell you much about the Trickster. Just that the Trickster is very much like Cade, in a way. Very secretive about stuff and very just like tricky. Specialises in like lots of traps and illusions and everything, and lots of explosives, which seems to be a running theme with the Scorn, to be fair, is explosions.
Yes. Well, considering we have the Mad Bomber.
Yeah, the Mad Bomber as well.
Who is basically the demolitionist of the group. And then the last three are the Hanged Man, the Rifleman, and the Rider.
So the Rifleman is quite interesting because he's the one that actually killed Cade's ghost. And basically, well, condemned Cade to never be risen again. So he's a specialist in the sniper and cloaking technology and cloning technology, so he can make sort of like holograms of himself to confuse others, which is quite interesting. And then there is, which one's the next one? The Hanged Man, which is just a big massive guy, to be honest. There isn't really too much to him. He just beats things up, which is quite awesome. Yeah, in a way, he sort of reminds me of a Titan. He reminds me exactly of a Titan. Titan in nature. And then what was the last one? The one around technology. The Rider. So the Rider specialises in sort of like rideable technology. So stuff like falling skiffs as well and stuff. So when you go into that fight, you basically take him on through vehicles, which is quite an interesting fun fight actually. Recommend anyone to try that if it ever comes up as a heroic adventure again, because it's good fun, that one. I enjoyed that one.
Cool.
And that's basically the Scorn in general. So they have a presence in the Dreaming City as well for some reason. That isn't explained lore-wise. It's just they're just there, which is fair enough. That's Destiny for you. It's just like some creatures are just there for reasons. Like the Fallen, for example, have no place on Nessus, really. They're just sort of there. but then that's just Destiny just filling up spaces, to be honest. And that moves us on to what is next, and what did I put on my list next?
Talking about the Fallen moving forward.
Yes. So the Fallen in Beyond Light. So now these Fallen very much remind me of the design of the Taken. I don't know what you think, man. They very much remind me. They very much remind me of the Taken through their design.
Yes. So so this is kind of what we know and understand and what we theorize so far. So in the promotional image for Beyond Light, if you haven't seen it already, I suggest you take a moment, click off this and go and look at it. You see Aramis, and if you've watched the recent trailer that came out yesterday, to date this video somewhat, during Gamescom, you see that Aramis is holding an object that looks very much like a prism, one of the pyramid ships that the darkness is supposed to be carried on. We know that Aramis is now the leader or the Kell of Darkness for the House of Darkness or the House of Devils, which she was trying to reform, and somehow is able to use the power of darkness as well, which means that she has had a confrontation with the darkness and has offered its arm to her, its aid. Mind you, this is not the first time we have seen a Fallen or a Lixney be affected by the darkness. We have the Scorn. As far as we can tell, and I know there was a trick question I asked Dan when you asked him about Dark Ether. What we understand is that the Dark Ether was manufactured through Fikrul, which is why he's immortal, but as a result of Aldrin's wish for him to be resurrected.
That wish.
So that was Revan's doing, and we know that Revan, through our fights with Revan, that he was somehow affected by the darkness, as he's able to take. So it seems to all come full circle when you start looking at Aramis now, and she has direct control over the darkness.
It's scary.
That is absolutely terrifying, but that also now suggests moving forward that either the enemy, the House of Darkness that is under Aramis's control, they will be also affected by the darkness and will have powers connected to the darkness, and as we'll talk about later, powers that emulate or seem to emulate the powers that we gain as Guardians. Stasis. So we'll see how that goes. Aramis looks absolutely frightening, if I must say. She's a lot bigger than the last time we saw her.
Like, massive. So basically, I reckon it's just like fed off the darkness or dark ether. Maybe dark ether might come into play again. In some sort of way.
Would that now reclass her as Scorn? But she's not dead. How was that changed? We'll see. That kind of just came to my head at that moment.
See, my whole theory behind sort of like dark ether is that it's ether infected by the darkness. So maybe it has different properties that can be used in different ways. So maybe it's just that's the way of Scorn use it, is to do that resurrection. Because they very much remind me of the Taken, these New Fallen. And they'll also may have something to do with the Deep Stone Crypt as well, which has been teased as a new raid.
But mentioning this the Taken, because Emrys is now in contact with the darkness and able to use its power, it does not mean that she doesn't have the power to take. Because all this time we've associated the power to take with the darkness. The Taken King had it, and we assume now that the Taken King is gone, that Savathun has access to that power. Because we've seen Taken appear in areas under her influence.
And there's also Riven as well.
Yes, Riven can't be dead.
Yeah, he can't be dead because that wish has just sort of made him immortal for the curse of the Dreaming City, which was Savathun's wish. Which is just that's a whole different story. Looking at the Hive, I think it might be a 3-parter, but that's a whole different story for another day.
Yes.
It just Hive stuff is just massive. But moving on, what other enemy types do you think we might find in Beyond Light? Because I think they'll mix it up quite a bit when it comes to the Fallen.
I don't know. I'm not too well versed. Obviously, I haven't played the game in ages, so in terms of those kind of questions, I can't answer. But when it comes to how they will affect us as Guardians fighting them, I do hope that they show some degree of ability to use stasis.
Yeah.
Or stasis-like abilities, because when I don't know if we've talked about what is the light, what is solar, what is arc, what is void. I don't think we've had that conversation on a personal basis, or when you guys have been playing, I've been watching.
Yeah.
But we might do an episode on this, or like have it as a segment in the future. But just a spark note version that the light and the dark are paracausal forces in the universe. They don't necessarily agree with our understanding of the established laws of physics. And each segment of power seems to derive from a particular force in nature. For instance, solar light is basically solar energy, but we can harness it and intensify it, and it comes out looking like fire. Whereas arc is that electrifying electromagnetic power that we can use to generate storms, shoot lightning, and do all manner of crazy stuff. Void light's a bit tricky because according to the Thanatonauts and warlocks in general, void light is that really, really weird grey area that transitions the light to dark. We don't really know what the void is, but we know we can harness it through the power of the light. So does that mean there's a way for us to use it when we change sides and use the darkness? Because that is that transitional period. That's a bit more of a question to think about later, but the stasis, as we're moving on to now, if you've seen the recent trailer that came out at Gamescom and like all the promotional material that showed up until now, that ice motif that seems to be going on here is definitely something that I agree with, in terms of if light is the abundance of something, darkness needs to be the opposite, is the absence of, and ice seems to encapsulate that absence of movement, of energy, and the stuff that we've seen with the light so far.
It's not as free flowing as the light. It's a bit more contained and refined.
But the ability to essentially stop something dead in its tracks, freeze it, flash freeze it even, and then shatter it, seems to be what we're looking at in terms of how stasis works. And I like the fact they use the word stasis rather than something like freeze or whatever. They could have had something a lot more on the nose, but because these paracausal powers are essentially connected to the universe as a whole, I would say that stasis, well, a further advancement of stasis would be entropy, would be death.
Yeah.
Instead of having the power of death.
We have down, might be something we have down along the lines one day. You never know.
Yeah. There might be some sort of entropy aspect to the power of darkness that we find along the line, but we can see that darkness isn't necessarily death, but it's not necessarily the end. The light and the dark are just two halves of the same whole. They continue a cycle. If you guys have been playing Destiny recently and you've seen many of the conversations between the Drifter and the Nine, and the emissary of the Nine, they've had conversations where the emissary has put forward that the Nine believe that the power of light and darkness are the same. They're the same set of tools. We've just picked one that we accept morally, rather than understanding them in their totality.
Which is an interesting topic, just in general, because it's just like,
Yeah,
that sort of like brings us to the point. Is just like, is the light all that good? Is the light necessary? Do we need to exterminate the darkness? Because there is no light without dark. There is no dark without light, because light casts shadows.
But this is mainly the debates that are put forward by the Drifter, and by Eris, and by the Stranger, and quite a few other characters that we've seen in the recent season have kind of put those questions kind of forward. Even Zavala is now in a position where he's questioning not just the Traveler, but what is the light? Why have we been given the light, and what kind of moral perspective do we now take, understanding or come to the understanding or realization that the light and the dark are not inherently good or evil, but very dependent on the people who use it and the groups that utilize it. And that's also a question to the audience as well playing the game. Like, where does your moral compass lie, and is it a moral conundrum to use what is dark and what is presumed to be evil?
See, that's why I think we'll be given, a lot of Guardians may be given a moral choice, especially those that are in the storyline as well, like Zavala and Ikora as well. I reckon some of them will pick a side of what they think is right, which I think is quite interesting, because we've never had that sort of divide before between the characters, especially the Vanguard. Because I don't know what you think, Lan, but I think the Vanguard might actually disband as a new sort of power comes up throughout the city.
That is an interesting conversation, because I was trying to catch up on some of the lore books on the run up to this video, and many of I was looking at the history of the consensus and how there are loads of groups that exist within the Lost City, but not all of them are part of the consensus.
Yeah.
And there was a dispute a few years ago regarding Ulan Tan, whose armor has resurfaced with tabs that had talk about him, and he happens to be a warlock, our favorite class, and he had his own suspicions about what the light and the dark was, with particular discussions about how we perceive what's going on around us in terms of how we use our light and such and such and such. Him, like Osiris, developed a group around him who formed a sizable party who were considered for a seat at the consensus table, but were not given it. So that means that there are groups out there who exist but aren't part of the consensus, who are not seen as political, with high enough political standing to have their voice heard in the city.
Yeah.
And we understand and know that the Vanguard are only one part of the consensus, and they don't have to be there.
Yeah,
So if the Vanguard does separate, that means that the consensus has less pull over the Guardians, which will make the Hunters happy, but the Guardians as a whole, as a group within themselves, look up to the Vanguard for not just mentorship, but for leadership. And it's been considerable time since Cade, rest his robotic soul, has left us, and the Hunters have already left the city in droves. Mostly in fear for the Vanguard dare, but they've been leaving.
Mainly because they don't want to be part of the Vanguard.
They know that the position is necessary, but they don't want to take the position themselves.
Yeah. Which
And
sort of backs up my theory that the Vanguard might fall apart, because at the moment there's no one to rein the Hunters in. Like at all.
do they need need reining in?
That's a good question.
Okay, I take that back. No, they do, because we've had some very scary Hunters out there recently.
Yeah.
Wasn't a few of the Dredgen's Hunters as well?
Yeah, I think the majority were Hunters. I think the Drifter's a Hunter. I think he is.
He's not technically classified,
Yeah.
but I would think he would be a hunter.
Yeah, easily. Just by the way his sort of demeanor is as well. I think Eris was a hunter as well, wasn't she?
No, she was a warlock.
Was she a warlock? I always get that confused.
Yeah, she was a warlock.
I must be thinking about someone else.
Because their fire team was 4 people. It was 2 warlocks, a hunter, and a titan.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yep, you're right.
That I remember because I found it really funny when we were looking for the nightmares.
Yeah, because I love that storyline. Such a good storyline.
But we've kind of diverted off, talked about the subclasses.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that. The subclasses that we recently got revealed. Again, if you haven't seen these for yourself, I suggest you click off and look for the Gamescom trailer and have a look for yourself. I think there was a blog post that also went up.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. I need to go do that. So definitely some reading for myself. I should have done that before, but it is what it is. We have, for the Titan, we get the Behemoth subclass, which is, oh god, a lovely name for the subclass. I really do like it.
I think it fits really well with the Titan sort of persona as well. It's just like the persona of a Titan as being that aggressive wall that just sort of can hit back just as hard.
And the armor aesthetic they showed off in the trailer also seems to embody that big bad behemoth mentality.
Yeah.
For the hunter we get the Revenant, which I wasn't expecting that to be the name for it, but every so often they do surprise me with the names of the subclasses. I do like all of the names for the hunter subclasses so far, so...
I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting that name, to be honest.
Never was I. But I do like it. I do. Like, all of the hunter subclasses revolves around an additional weapon. You got your golden gun, you got your bow, you've got the knives, you've got your staff, your arc, strider. It's different weapons, and this one you happen to get a pair of sickles, or a pair of scythes. And
awesome.
They're cool. And mechanically, they look fantastic. Being able to bounce off walls is a smart way to play a super.
Yeah.
And I've been waiting for them to do it.
Agreed. Now, just some context for everyone that's actually paying attention to the gameplay of what I'm actually doing, because I'm just loading in and out of the moon constantly at the moment. What I'm actually doing is I'm trying to do a Master Nightmare hunt solo and flawless. Which is why every time I die or get bodied by something immediately, I go straight back up into orbit. So if you're wondering why the hell I'm doing that, that's why.
Okay.
Some context for
I was kind of wondering what you were doing too.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to do. But that brings us back to the subclasses quite nicely in the perfect. So who have we got left? We just spoke about the hunters as well. It's just like, so who have we got left?
We have the Shadebinder. I feel that name is a bit on the nose, but
yeah, it really is, isn't it? Especially because I think warlocks are actually quite close to the dark anyway. I feel because they're the more curious subclass, I think.
It's one thing for a hunter to be close to the dark to be able to use their void light, but the warlocks avidly try to understand what the void is. So it's like that whole speech by Bane, like you think you know, but I was born in it. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Between the hunters and the warlocks, but the Shadebinder is pretty much on the nose. That super is all about locking down your enemies and preventing their movement.
Yeah, which kind of leads into what hunters actually are in general, especially with the tether as well.
Yes. So the one thing I have noticed about the supers is they seem to like each super, especially between the hunters and the warlocks, they seem to change in terms of nature. So you have things like the golden gun, the nova bomb, and the arc super subclass. I forgot what that was called for the Titans.
Striker,
yeah. So those ones are kind of similar. So it's all about, well, I mean, I would say one shot, but it's all about pummeling your enemy from a distance.
Yeah.
Then you have your I always forget what they're called. Oh my gosh, I have to go look them up now.
Just tell me. Just tell me which one you're talking about. Huh?
So the Void Titan,
Sentinel.
the Sentinel, I want to say it's the Arc Hunter, and then the Solar Warlock.
Yeah, so the Dawnblade and the Arc Staff.
Yeah, Arc Strider.
Arc
So
Strider.
they're, well, the Titans are a bit unfair because they also get the Solar Hammer as well.
Yeah.
But those are like weapon-based, melee, somewhat focused. But they have like a ranged component to them. So like there's certain trends where like all the classes have a subclass that do similar things. And then you've got these ones now, these stasis ones, and they all more or less do very much the same thing.
Yeah.
They can all stun or lock down your opponents in place for massive damage. Because they all, from the footage they showed us, it seems that all of them can, on contact with the super, are frozen, and then can be dealt damage subsequently, can be shattered. So I think this is the first time where an entire element set of subclasses does the same thing.
Yeah, which is very interesting to sort of see how that all works and everything, and how they balance that as well, and how that will sort of like mix up the meta as well.
Well, you had a question last week about the introduction of stasis element weapons. Now we've gone a long time having arc weapons and solar weapons and void weapons, and then you have your kinetic weapons on top. But the introduction of stasis weapons would very much mix up the weapon meta and how you pair up your weapons, especially your main and your secondary,
especially for what they
your kinetic and your energy. Sorry, because they changed it, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah, so
And how
kinetic, energy, and power.
Yeah. So that will change up things. And you said in, I think it was it Armor 2.0 or was it Armor 3 where they added
Armor
the
2.0, where they added
it was Armor
elements.
2.0 to the armor. So there's lots of things when Beyond Light does come out. That's a nice jumping off point for what's moving forward. Going to be, I guess, armor and weapons 3.0 because that's basically what it's going to be.
Yeah, it has to be that. They have to rejig it in a way of how they all work and everything. Because stasis could just make all other weapons irrelevant. All other elements irrelevant, but they can't let that happen. Because it would break the meta of the game. Of course, Bungie are no strangers to breaking the meta of the games. Just look at some of the weapons that they introduce in the game in general. Sometimes they have a very broken meta.
They will introduce one weapon and everything will fly out the window.
Yeah, that's definitely one way of putting it. Just look at the weapons I'm using at the moment, the Jotun and the Mountaintop. Absolute game-breaking weapons.
In all fairness, you worked very hard for the Jotun, so...
Oh, don't get me started on my work with the Jotun. And the Mountaintop, to be fair. I only recently just got the Mountaintop. That took a long time. Okay, these guys are really coming after me now. That's not good. Okay, I'm trapped. That's not good.
That's not good at all.
No, it's definitely not. And the door's... Oh, really? Okay, yep, dead. There goes another flawless run. Even though I need to complete this anyway, so I'm just going to keep going. But I think that brings us to just about it, doesn't it? I think we've mentioned everything. It's just like... But it will be very interesting to see where stasis brings us, what it brings us, and how they use it in exotics. Because
that was another question.
We have a lot of exotics that modify how supers work. So, like, for instance, there's the Celestial Nighthawk, which makes it a one-shot super, but gives it like over penetrating rounds and everything, and basically makes it boss.
Yes.
So we've got exotics like that have made a difference like that. So it'll be interesting to see what exotics they actually bring to change how those supers work. Because I think there's a lot of potential with stasis. Or even if they introduce an exotic that makes them really harness the power of the darkness. So sort of like overcharges it to give it that entropy effect as well.
I definitely look forward to what stasis and the power of darkness will then bring to the table, and how they will develop out what kind of powers the darkness will give us. Because I feel like once you introduce something like the power of darkness, you need to have something. You have to build it in such a way where it matches the light. So I'm really hoping they'll make three separate classes from the darkness power base.
Yeah,
So it won't just be stasis. There'll be two others. So then you would have 6 in total. That might be a lot for players to handle, but I think if you're going to match light and dark, you have to do it that way.
Well, how it normally works, and
Or
how
you have 5, and you have void that's in the middle.
Yeah.
As that one that bridges the gap.
See how it has worked in the past, especially with subclass balancing as well, is that they have what's it called? They have diverging trees. So like in the original form of D2, we only had 2 options per subclass. Oh god, that hurt. Anyway, yeah, they had 2 options per subclass, which changed what the super actually did and everything, and how it sort of worked. And then they added the third one, which basically changed up the whole super for some of them. So that is the sort of dynamic I think they might go down, of having those 3 options. So having them work similar to how the light supers worked, of having those divulging trees. Which I think will be interesting. But I guess we shall see what happens. And on that note, I think it's a good time to leave it there, isn't it?
See.
Our next episode will be about... I'll tell you what. I'm going to let him choose now, live on stream. What do you want our next topic to be about? Our next one to... our next faction to hit?
Let's... I think the Hive is going to be a really big topic, and I would rather get that out of the way sooner rather than later. So let's talk about the Hive.
Okay, so get ready for a 3-part episode, which we will also include the Taken in that as well. Because they relate to each other really well, I think. So that's what we'll do from there in everything.
Cool.
Right. Perfect. Well, this has been Daniel the Ultimate Blade, along with
Land the Ultimate Form,
and we have been DestinyCast. So like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to hit that notification bell, and we will catch you guys later. As I die. That's perfect. Peace out, everyone.